Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our December edition of Bites and Bits of History. I'm Tracy Manning, and I'm happy to welcome you guys to what I think is going to be a really fun presentation this afternoon. Now, I'm going to let you guys know we're actually filming this in November, so some of the things I'm going to talk to you about upcoming events certainly might change as we're still dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic. But hopefully you guys are still able to enjoy our holiday offerings online and all the great new virtual things that we're doing, like our holiday hands-on history activities for families, our time capsule blog posts, which are highlighting various holidays and traditions throughout the season, and then also our vintage video series, which is looking back at some of the great historic footage we have in our Business and Media Archives collection, as well as our holiday artifact series that's highlighting pieces from our collection that are affiliated with different holidays. Now, today's program is called Cheers to Your Health, and it's going to be presented by Cassie Nespor. She's a longtime friend of the Mahoning Valley Historical Society, and I know you guys love her and love the great presentations that she brings. She's the curator at the Library, Special Collections and Archives at Youngstown State University, and as well as that role, she's also the director of the Melnick Medical Museum at YSU. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in History from Dickinson College, and then a Master's of Library and Information Sciences from the University of Pittsburgh. She's been at YSU since 2009, so I'm very happy and excited to introduce Cassie Nespor.
Hi, my name's Cassie Nespor, and I'm the curator of the Melnick Medical Museum at Youngstown State University. The museum has a medical history artifact and book collection focusing on the medical history of the Mahoning Valley, the practice of medicine and dentistry, radiology, and nursing. The most iconic artifacts include a 1952 Emerson iron lung respirator and a collection of X-ray machines from the early 20th century. The museum has moved to a new location in Cushwa Hall and will be open very soon. I look forward to resuming in-person presentations in the community once the COVID safety restrictions are lifted. The museum website and my contact information will be shared at the end of this presentation. Today, I was asked to give a short presentation combining medical history with the holiday season. It was a tough combination, but as the holidays are typically a time of parties and celebrations, I thought we'd have some fun today examining the medical roots of some modern cocktails. After I discuss the medical history, we'll cut to the professionals at Sam's Wedge Inn in Austintown, who will demonstrate how the cocktails are made. This information is not intended for medical advice. This represents historical beliefs and is meant for informational purposes only. So cocktails and medicine seem like a strange connection, but the medicines Americans used in the 18th and 19th century were often made from plants, and alcohol is a good way to extract and preserve the medicinal parts of the plants in syrups and wines. Medical treatment at this time also centered in the home. Medicines were made at home by the physician or by the physician who made house calls. There were very few pharmacies, hospitals, or doctors' offices. Alcohol also found its way into medicines as a carrier for crushed, powdered, or dried plant parts. At this time period, these medicines would be added to beverages that people often drank, such as tea, coffee, and other brewed, fermented, or distilled beverages, since all of these processes kill any bacteria that might be present in the water. There were a limited number of ways to administer medicine at this time. Most medicines were applied topically or taken orally. Skin ailments and minor wounds were often treated with ointment, salves, or poultices. If medicine was meant to treat internal, often digestive tract ailments, the medicine would be made into a drink. Pills were used infrequently since they required more time to make and sometimes special equipment like molds. Pills were often purchased at pharmacies or used in early over-the-counter medicines. And hypodermic needles for injections were not commonly used until the late 1800s. So in the late 1700s and early 1800s, the most common way to take medicine was by drinking it. In most cases, families or physicians might make wine, beer, or an oil or syrup from these plants in the appropriate season and then store them for use as needed throughout the year. To help make the connections between medicinal drinks and our modern cocktails, I'll be using a digitized version of King's American Dispensary by John Lloyd from 1898. These volumes were first published in 1854 and covered the use of herbs in American medical practice, especially by those practitioners involved in eclectic medicine, which was a botanical school of medicine that was popular in the 19th and 20th centuries. John Uri Lloyd was an eclectic pharmacist at this time, and he revised the pharmaceutical and chemical sections of the American Dispensary and published an entirely rewritten edition in 1898. As a side note, the Lloyd Library in Cincinnati specializes in botany, pharmacy, natural history, and medical books, and was established by John Lloyd and his two brothers, who were all pharmacists and manufactured medicine in Cincinnati. The staff at the Lloyd Library pointed me in the right direction for this presentation. The other text I'll be using is The Drunken Botanist by Amy Stewart, published by Algonquin Books in 2013. The book combines the author's passions for botany and mixed drinks by exploring hundreds of plants that were fermented, distilled, masticated, infused, mixed, or otherwise made into drinks. The herbal images used in this presentation came from the 2 volumes of Medicinal Plants in Lifelike Illustrations and Brief Explanatory Text by Franz Kohler, published in Leipzig, Germany in 1887. So, what kinds of medicines were used in the 18th and 19th centuries? Germs wouldn't be discovered and understood until the late 1800s. So, contemporary to the publish of Lloyd's Dispensary and afterward. Before that, by hundreds of years, people believed that your health was a balance of 4 humors present in your body. The humors are noted in red on the graphic: phlegm, blood, yellow bile, and black bile. They were broadly defined by being a combination of hot and cold, wet or dry. These humors could be influenced by the weather, the stars, or even your temperament. If you felt sick, people believed that your humors were out of balance, and medical treatments tried to restore the correct balance. The doctor would ask questions or do a physical examination to determine which humor was out of balance, noting if the patient was hot or cold, wet or dry. There was a lot of bleeding or bloodletting during this time, which was connected to the blood humor, which had symptoms of fever and sweating. However, illnesses associated with yellow and black bile, based in your digestive tract, used special diets or medicines to restore the balance. Ginger is a good place to start with medicinal herbs. It is a well-known plant whose roots have been used to aid digestion for centuries. The roots were a prized spice traded from China and India to Europeans in the 17th century. The roots were dug up, scraped, and then dried in the sun. When powdered, they have a yellowish color. According to the 1898 King's American Dispensary, physicians used it for yellow bile and digestive problems. Lloyd wrote, "When swallowed, ginger acts as a stimulating tonic, increasing the secretion of gastric juice, exalting the excitability of the alimentary muscular system, and dispelling gases accumulated in the stomach and bowels." The book noted that hot ginger tea was a popular and efficient remedy for breaking up colds. It could also be added to other medicines to cover up their taste or to counteract the side effects of nausea. Recipes for ginger beer and wine were actually printed in the 1898 dispensary. Lloyd recommended bruising the ginger root and then boiling it in water. Ginger beer is made with water, sugar, ginger, lemon, and yeast. Pretty easy to make at home if you're used to brewing your own beer. Today, ginger beer is frequently mixed with vodka and garnished with a lime to make a Moscow Mule. A non-alcoholic version of it is ginger ale, which is also commonly used in cocktails.
All right, so next we're going to be making the classic Moscow Mule. So just a quick little story of the Moscow Mule. It originated from a lady named Sophie. She came over from Moscow, Russia, to the United States, and she ended up in Hollywood, California. She had no idea what to do with this abundance of copper that she had. She ended up meeting two guys, one that owned a ginger beer company and one that owned Smirnoff vodka, which we'll be using today. At that time, the distribution of both companies were failing, and so collectively they decided to create a drink. And they used the copper mug because, as we all know, copper keeps things really cold. So they came up with the Moscow Mule. What it calls for is you want to fill the mug completely with ice. And what you want to do is choose a half of a lime right over top of the ice. Drop the half of the lime in, and then it calls for 1.5 ounces of Smirnoff vodka. You pour that right over the ice and the lime. And then you top it off with ginger beer. And you just want to give it a little toss, not a shake. And then garnish with 2 stir straws.
Juniper is an evergreen shrub whose berries have been used in medicines since antiquity. The berries can be difficult to harvest in large quantities because they take 2 to 3 years to ripen, and each tree can have berries in any stage of ripening. After picking, the berries are dried in a cool, dark place and protected from the sun and mold. An essential oil made from the berries was used in medicines. According to King's Dispensary, the berries or oil were used as a diuretic to cleanse the liver or kidneys, or to treat stomach pain. It was generally used as a diuretic or to treat inflammation from excess fluid in the urinary tract. It was commonly used to treat dropsy, which today we call edema, which is swelling caused by the accumulation of excess fluid. Spiritus juniperis, or spirit of juniper, is made by fermenting the juniper berries in water to create a juniper wine that is then distilled, sometimes called juniper brandy. This 1890s prescription from the Melnick Medical Museum collection called for 11 ounces of the spirit of juniper with a little bit of potassium acetate and potassium nitrate, all mixed in peppermint water. The instructions written on the bottom direct the patient to take a teaspoonful twice a day with an occasional laxative at night. Although we don't have the physician's diagnosis, I think we can assume that this prescription was to help some digestive ailment. According to Stewart, the drunken botanist, the distillation of juniper berries, particularly in the 17th century Dutch culture, yielded something similar to gin. When the British invaded the Netherlands in the mid-17th century, they adopted the beverage as well. It quickly gained popularity in England, and by the early 1800s, the British were making some excellent varieties of gin. A classic gin cocktail is the dry martini. 3 parts gin to 1 part dry white vermouth. Shake or stir and pour over ice. Strain and garnish with an olive or lemon peel.
Next, we're going to be making the classic dry gin martini. So I have a martini glass here that is being chilled. I used ice and I used soda water. The soda water is best because the carbonation makes the glass freeze faster, makes the bubbles make the glass freeze faster. So that's chilling, and what I'm going to do is build the martini in a shaker tin. So we're going to use 2 ounces of gin. I'm using Hendrick's again, it's my favorite. So 2 ounces of that. And we're gonna use a 1/2 ounce of dry vermouth. All you do now is give the martini a really good shake. And we are going to dump the glass out. And we're gonna strain the mixture right into the glass. Now, you can garnish this with a lime or a lemon I like to use olives, and we're just gonna pop it in like that.
While we're on the subject of vermouth, did you know that it has medical roots as well? It is a wine made from the flowers of a plant called wormwood, whose botanical name is Artemisia absinthium. It is a perennial plant with a woody base growing 1 to 4 feet in height. In the United States, it is common in the mountainous elevations of the New England states. It is commonly used as a remedy for sprains, bruises, and localized inflammations. Most people steeped dried wormwood flowers in vinegar and hot water to create a poultice that was placed on the skin. Physiologically, it acts as a nerve depressant. In 1898, Lloyd wrote that it has a decided medicinal quality, acting with considerable force on the cerebrum and sympathetic nervous system. I read several 19th century claims that it expels intestinal parasites. Considering that, it seems wise that Lloyd recommended using it in small doses. He found it to be a useful treatment to stimulate the appetite, which would be helpful in a convalescence or rehabilitation cases, or even to stimulate the muscles of the digestive tract, making it useful to treat indigestion. Wormwood wine eventually became vermouth, which is wine fortified with alcohol. In addition to the dry martini, vermouth is also used in a Manhattan. 1 ounce of vermouth, 2 ounces dry whiskey, and 2 dashes of aromatic bitters.
All right, so now we're gonna make the infamous Manhattan. So fun fact about the Manhattan, it was created in the 1870s in Manhattan by a doctor who created this drink for a presidential debate in a bar called the Manhattan Club. And we're gonna be using Rock and Rye by Slow and Low. This is also infamous because this used to be sold in pharmacies. It's made with orange peel, rock candy, and it's really good for coughs and whatnot. And actually they used to give it to you in pharmacies if you were sick. So we're gonna start with the Rock and Rye. And it's my favorite whiskey, so we're gonna use 2 ounces of the Rock and Rye. And we're building this in a shaker with ice in it. And then we're gonna use a 1/2 ounce of sweet vermouth. Toss it in like such, and we're gonna use 1 to 2 dashes of bitters. It's an aromatic bitter. We're gonna do 2 dashes really quickly, and then we're gonna put the top on, and we're just gonna give it 1, 2, 3 slight tosses. Off to my left here, we have a rocks glass with 2 maraschino cherries. These have been soaking in Maker's Mark for probably over a year or so. We're gonna take our drink and pour it right over top of the cherries. And the way that we're doing it today is we're gonna rub a orange peel around the glass. It makes for a bitter taste. And then we're gonna twist the orange and toss it right into the glass. And that is a Manhattan.
In Germany, wormwood flowers could be substituted for hops to make a vermouth beer. The creators of this beer reasoned that the cleansing power of the plant that expelled intestinal worms would also help preserve their beer. And in France, they make a liqueur called Absinthe, which combines the oil of wormwood with other aromatics like anise, coriander, and angelica. Stewart recommends preparing absinthe by dripping 4 ounces of cold water into 1 ounce of absinthe as slowly as possible, which allows an interesting chemical reaction to take place slowly. And you can observe the change of color to a milky green. Perhaps the most famous herbal turned cocktail is Chinchona. It is a tree native to South America, and it is sometimes called Peruvian bark because the bark is the part used for medicinal purposes. Have you heard of this one? It is usually prepared for medicinal use as a powder, but it has a very bitter taste. Native tribes in the Andes Mountains use the bark to treat fevers and heart conditions. Historically, this powder played a vital role in the colonization of many tropical countries, since it also treats malaria. The bark contains quinine. Jesuit priests in South America learned that it cured malaria, and by the early 1700s, Europeans were sending ships to the South American shore to harvest the tree trunks. The Dutch cultivated orchards in an island called Java, now part of Indonesia, and they started a process that harvested the bark by stripping it and then covering the area with moss so that the tree regenerates the bark. The bitter taste of quinine needs other powerful flavors like sugar, lemon, or lime to make it agreeable. In South America, at the time of the Jesuit priests, locals used to mix it with sugar and naturally carbonated water. When the British Army started to use it to treat malaria, they preferred to take their medicine, or tonic, with their favorite drink, gin. And the gin and tonic was born.
We're gonna start with the classic gin and tonic, and we're gonna be using Hendrick's gin. So it calls for 1.5 ounces of gin. You wanna make sure you fill the glass to the very top with ice. Like such. You pour the tonic right over top. And then you want to finish with a squeeze of lime and drop it in the glass with 2 stir straws.
I hope you enjoyed this light-spirited talk on medicine and cocktails. Feel free to call me or email me with questions. And thanks to our friends at Sam's Wedge Inn for their help. Cheers to your health in the new year.
Thank you so much, Cassie. I think it's kind of maybe inspiring to look back at how some of these cocktails came about and maybe giving us a little advice for a way to celebrate the end of this holiday season. So I hope you guys will join us next month in January when we are going to be taking kind of a team effort looking at the history of the local Ys. So the YWCA, the YMCA, and the African American YMCA that is in the current rescue mission building. So we'll see you guys next month in January. Thank you.